I see that in resentful men all the time. They're very antipathetic towards women, and they blame their misery and resentment on the fact that women won't have anything to do with them, while the women are making them self-conscious for not being all they should be. Because the women think, why should I bother with you if you're not the embodiment of the spirit that will move into the unknown and face the Leviathan, which is exactly what she should be saying. And you're thinking, well, I don't want to have anything to do with that, but I'd like women to like me anyways. It's like, well, good luck with that.
Why can't men find women to date? That's not your problem. Your problem is why you can't find the woman you want. Yeah. And you have to assume that's your problem, because otherwise you have to assume that it's the women's problem. And really? They're all wrong and you're right. Really? Lucky you. Maybe you are. You're an undiscovered gem of some sort. Probably not. I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you, because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right.
Wow.
Now, that might I know that's a terrible thing to say, and I know perfectly well, it wasn't like I was particularly successful with girls when I was young. So I know what that rejection is like. I know what that fear is like. I don't know it as well as some men know it, because I wasn't rejected outright. But what you have to understand is that, what do you expect from women? If you got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too. So, clue in a bit. And then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? Are you a liar? Are you a rabid pornography user? Because maybe that's undermining your motivation to seek out a woman and grow yourself up. It's like, if you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, because that's another thing to ask yourself, is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league? Because you might be. So, and I'm speaking about this as a clinician too, because I had plenty of men in my practice who were, radically unsuccessful with women. I had one man in particular. He was so afraid of women he couldn't use the phone. He was too afraid of everyone to use the phone. And he had been bullied like mad, and he had his problems. So I know what this is like. But pornography is a big problem. It's a big problem. It's a real curse, that pornography, in my opinion, because it's an easy out. And so we don't know what the consequences of that are. We're starting to understand some of them. But if you were better, you'd be more successful with women. So you have to have that in your mind. And you cannot be angry at women. It's stupid. Women? It's like women being angry at men. It's a sign of psychological trouble, that.
Who's more self-conscious, women or men? And the answer to that is, women are more self-conscious than men. And even further, you might say that women taught men to be self-conscious, and I believe that to be the case. Maybe babies taught women to be self-conscious, but women taught men to be self-conscious, and they still teach them that all the time. Because there's nothing that makes a man more self-conscious than to be rejected by a woman that he desires. So the woman is always offering self-consciousness to men, and it isn't necessarily a gift that they exactly appreciate. And that motif, of course, runs through the Adam and Eve story centrally, because Eve is damned forever, in some sense, for making Adam self-conscious. Well, he didn't want to be self-conscious. Things were pretty good when his eyes were closed and he was wandering around, not worrying about whether he was naked or not.
So it's more or less a truism that if you take a male dominance hierarchy, the probability that the men at the top of the hierarchy will leave offspring is much higher than the probability that the men at the bottom will leave offspring. And it's true in many, many species. Now, there's a much higher probability of the average female leaving offspring than the average man. So now then imagine that there's characteristics that push a man up a dominance hierarchy. Okay, and then imagine that there are characteristics that push a man up a set of dominance hierarchies. so that each dominance hierarchy has something in common with all of the others. It's sort of like the idea of a good player of a game being a good sport across games. So then imagine that the idea of the successful male starts to become encapsulated in biology, because the species is going to, the male part of the species at least, is going to be adapting to the selection pressures placed on the male by the male dominance hierarchy. So what happens is you have a competition between men. The men that win the competition find partners and mate. So the male is going to start to adapt to the fact of the selection that's implemented by the dominance hierarchy. Then you can imagine that that's going to take place across dominance hierarchies, because this is happening in many, many situations spread across time. And so then the idea of how the proper man should act starts to become incorporated in the biology and also in the expectations of the society. And then that starts to loop. So as the expectations become clearer and clearer, the notion of what it constitutes success becomes clearer and clearer as well, and the two things get tangled together. Now, and I think you can see that, a manifestation of that, whenever you go watch a movie, because you immediately identify the hero and you identify with him. It's like he's the person that your mythological imagination grasps onto, and you play that out using your body as a representational platform when you watch the movie. And so maybe you admire the hero. If he's a successful hero, you do. Well, that admiration is the manifestation of the instinct that drives you towards that kind of behavior. And not only can you manifest it, in which case you're likely to feel good about yourself, because you know that sometimes you can feel good about yourself and sometimes not, but you're also going to be able to recognize it when you see it in the world. And that's going to manifest itself in admiration. And admiration is the proclivity to imitate. So the meme can be you can imagine, dominance hierarchies are very, very old. They're like 300 million years old. They've been around a very long time. And the idea that we have an image of what it takes to climb the dominance hierarchy, it's more or less self-evident. Because that's the landscape that selected us. And at the same time, you know, the archetype, the pattern that propagates you up the dominance hierarchy is also the same pattern that makes you attractive to women. They're the same thing.
And so what the females seem to be doing is using some marker or some set of markers as a proxy indicator for health. And I think you could say reasonably that female human beings do the same thing to male human beings. And there's some of that vice versa too. Like we evaluate each other, for example, for symmetry, which is one of the elements of beauty, because healthier people tend to be more symmetrical. And lots of animals use symmetry. Butterflies, if butterflies won't mate with another butterfly if it deviates from symmetry by the tiniest amounts you can imagine. So symmetry is a marker, and there's other markers like shoulder width to waist width is one, and waist width to hip width is another. That's usually what males use that to evaluate females in part. So there's lots of markers of health. But it also looks to me like the data worldwide seems to indicate that women, so imagine that women mate across dominance hierarchies and up, socioeconomically speaking. And on average, across cultures, women go for men who are about 4 to 5 years older. You know, it varies. In the Scandinavian countries, that's shrunk a little bit, but not that much. And in other cultures, it's bigger. I would say that depends to some degree on difficulty of establishing economic independence, right? Because in richer countries, it's easier to have enough economic independence if you're a male to be a useful participant in the process of having children. But it doesn't matter. Cross-culturally, it's still across and up, where men mate across and down. They don't care much about socioeconomic status. It doesn't seem to be part of their selection method, generally speaking. So I think that part of that is also the ability of women to select for male health. It's something like that, because it isn't only that, because if you're healthy and energetic, you're much more likely to be successful, because it's very hard to be successful if you're ill, obviously. I mean, because the competition is just too high. And both genders, both sexes select each other for attractiveness, both select for intelligence, both select for personality, although there are differences there in terms of what's stressed.
be a little stronger, dress a little better, speak a little more clearly, aim a little higher, and practice that, and that'll work. Now, I know that that's more difficult for some people than others, because some people bear incredibly difficult developmental burdens, and I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying that it's a useful reaction. What else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? Complain about women? I've seen that in men. I went out with a group of men who were having trouble with their wives, and they'd gone off to this couples retreat, and it was mostly rubbish, although they were trying a bit to get their lives together. And I spent a whole day with them. There were 3 of them, and one of them was a guy that I'd known for quite a while, and every single word he said was a lie. And all these 3 did the whole day was complain about their wives. And I thought, what the hell's wrong with you guys? You picked them. They're these women you picked, and maybe they have their flaws, but they're your wives. And that's how you talk about them? And you think they're the problem? You're so dumb that you don't even know that you shouldn't badmouth your wife. Just because she's your wife. When Tammy and I got married, we had a discussion about that. It's she has her flaws and I have my flaws, but I'm her husband and she's my wife, and there's a certain respect that goes along with that category, if you have any sense. And so that's an extension of the same thing. It's best to look to yourself. Now and then you can, things have gone rotten in society, and you have to bear your responsibility. You have to address that at a social level and a communal level. But fundamentally, it's and you do so much less harm if you look to yourself first as the problem. But then believe me, you're plenty of problem for you. You're all the problem you need for you. That's for sure.
Anh hay mơ mộng mình thứ xa xôi, không màng về tình ái muôn nơi, sống cho là trọn kiếp đây thôi, đâu quan tâm gì chuyện đời. Thế mà lại ngâm tương tư, ông tầm bà mũi xe tơ, đêm nằm trộm nhớ mơ mơ về ai. Thì ra anh yêu rồi, từ ánh mắt nụ cười, từ đôi môi gọi mưa sao xuyến lòng anh. Thì ra mê em rồi, ngày hay đêm ôm lời, chỉ nghĩ đến em thôi, đó là do anh đã yêu rồi. yêu